It's time for another CCS Alumni Live. I'm really excited. Today's guest is someone who not only is an alumni, but was an amazing student ambassador when we were on campus, when we had student ambassadors in the office on campus. So I'm really excited to talk to today's guest. I am going to introduce today's guest as a few folks start to join the live. So welcome those who are already here. Hello, I see some folks joining. So I'm going to introduce our guest, and then we're going to get into the live Q&A with today's guest. If you have questions already on your mind about being a CCS student, being a CCS graduate, being a fine artist, or being an art educator, make sure you tap that question box at the bottom and add your questions. So, Allie Runyan is today's guest. She is a CCS Fine Arts and Art Education graduate. She just graduated in 2019, so what seems like yesterday. And she's an amazing practicing artist and educator. As a practicing artist, she does work including sculptures from found objects, amazingly overstimulating, crazy, beautiful, large-scale installations and performances. She also merges this work that she does with sculpture and installation into detailed black and white drawings as a way to re-examine the sculptures that she creates as artifacts in time. So Allie, she recently had her work in exhibitions, including If You Throw a Toy in Jail, which was an installation at Hatch Art Gallery in Hamtramck, as well as I Make My Biggest Moves at 333 Midland Gallery in Detroit. Alongside art making, she is a art teacher in various capacities across the city, including Community Arts Partnership, which is a part of CCS. It's the community arts arm of CCS. Which is also a nonprofit. She is the director of the Cap at Home program, which I've been tuning into, which has been really fun. She's also an instructor for CCS's Continuing Studies and Pre-College studio. So she's providing instruction to students who are interested in continuing their education or interested in getting an early start on their education with CCS. And she's also a studio instructor at the DIA. She is, to me, one of the most delightful students that I've met at CCS. And without further ado, I am going to add Allie Runyan so we can get our conversation started today. So while Allie is joining, welcoming everybody. There she is.
Hi.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good. I take it that's an installation of yours behind you.
Yeah, I'm in my studio right now.
That's amazing. Where is your studio based? I mean, I know locally, but like where are you?
Oh, sorry. I'm in my studio right now.
No, where is your studio?
Oh, I'm actually moved back home to be with family right after I graduated, so I actually took over the basement, like the entire basement. And so I turned it into my studio. My parents were really great for allowing me to do that, and so I have like storage space and working space, and I have my like teaching space for Cap at Home, and so it's just the whole basement.
I bet it is like Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's like a super fun world to walk into because your work is beautiful.
It definitely is. There's not a single space in here that doesn't have color or pattern or like things happening.
I'm sure that includes your wardrobe. I see all your beautiful jewelry and everything too. Oh, it's so good to see your face. I'm excited to chat with you today. So just so you know how today works, I'm going to ask you a few questions, and then anybody who's tuning in can add their questions to the little Q&A box, little question box at the bottom, and I'll be sure to ask their questions too. So you might have a few questions coming to you. So first, I want to catch up with you and learn a little bit more about how you identify yourself, because you say fine arts, but you also teach. And so do you call yourself an art educator? Do you call yourself a fine artist? Like, what title would you say describes your career or what you do in the world?
I would say if there's like a term for like an everything artist, which I feel like is actually pretty accurate to most artists, because I don't actually know any artist that just does one thing.
Right.
And I feel like that's just sort of like, it's not so much the like you have to do more than one thing to make money. I feel like most of us are just, we do a lot of things constantly, so it's just how we work. So I would say I'm like, I identify myself as a teacher and an artist. Like I never just say I'm one or the other. Because I think they're both equally as important, and I think they both feed into the different parts of my life. So I would never just single out one aspect.
That's beautiful. You live in the duality or in the multiplicities. I'm sure there's more.
Yes. It's just chaos constantly. I feel like that's pretty accurate.
So I have a question for you. It's actually something that came up in one of my previous alumni conversations with another fine art graduate who's also an art educator, Craig Nowak. The question came up, how do you define art, or what is art to you? How do you define that term for yourself?
Well, for myself, I feel like when I'm thinking about art, I'm thinking about things that, like in terms of like things that I'm looking at, I think art to me is like very colorful. It kind of invokes some sort of reaction, whether that's good or bad, or something that's visually intriguing, something that gives a message or is a way of communicating, because I mean, it really is a way of communicating. And I've worked with enough kids to know that you sometimes get to know people way more out of making art than you do with just having a conversation with them. And so I mean, that's like part of like the psychology aspect, but the other part of it is just thinking about there's art everywhere, and art doesn't have to be like a painting on a wall or like a statue or a sculpture. I mean, it can be a variety of things, and I think that's also something I try and teach as well, like in my classes, that art can be wearable. It can be made of recycled things. You don't have to have specific materials. Art is a practice. It's what you want it to be, and it's also super like dependent upon the person. So I mean, what you think or what you're inspired by or what you relate to or get a reaction out of might be different than what I am. So I feel like that's sort of like how I look at it. It's like it's definitely some sort of reaction, gives a message, way of communicating, and it's a visually stimulating way of giving a message. So that's how I would describe it.
That's a powerful definition. So what would you say is the message that you try to communicate, or the conversations that you try to start with your art?
Yeah, I feel like there's a couple of different aspects I tap into. One is obviously the recycling and the reduce, reuse, recycle, and that has a lot to do with like my family background. And I come from a family who's pretty environmentally friendly, and we think about things like that. But also like the idea of like memories and things like that, things you don't like think about, or the idea that things are like once they're out of your sight, you don't really think about it. So it's like now I have all this junk and I'm gonna like put it in a place, and now we have to talk about it because it's in front of you. So I feel like there's that aspect, but there's another aspect that I'd like to tap into, which I started when I was at CCS, which was really having fun with your art and being able to create something that brings a smile or brings a laugh or, has some sort of like joke or comic to it. And I think sometimes it's, especially like becoming an adult, is incredibly stressful and there's lots of things going on constantly, and I think being able to step into a place or look at a piece of art that like makes you kind of stop and smile for a minute or forget about what's going on, things like that, I feel like I really enjoy, and that's what I strive to make in my own work. And like while there might be other hidden messages and other things going on, like overall walking into like a overwhelming like installation that has like 100 colors and looks like a rainbow threw up is like it made like that sentence alone made you smile, and that's what I want out of people, because I feel like sometimes there's a stigma that art has to be really serious or in which it has a perfect opportunity to do that. And I don't it's not like I look down on people who use art in a way, like that's obviously great, it's just not my aspect.
Yeah, I definitely feel like you're successful in that. I mean, from my perspective, successful in that message and that that ideology, because I know every time I've walked into like the studio space seeing your work or like an exhibition on the fine arts floor, I'm just like, not only is it just like colors and sparkles and toys, but it's also like a big nostalgia bomb, and it does give like the warm fuzzies. Like what's behind you is just like, it's like
I
the
know, like
Barbie
I'll
land
just
and
like duck
rainbows
down
and
and
joy. Yeah, yeah, I love
I know,
it.
and I have some like cap at home projects on the side here, and I just started collecting them and
That's so awesome.
got some nice dinosaur feet over there.
I caught the cap at home with like I think it was like a shark hat, and then I saw one where you're doing like 3D portraits, and I was like, I wish I had some construction paper. That looks so fun. So tell me this, because you just graduated, like 2017 was a sneeze away. It feels like it just became 2020, even though it's June. And you on your resume have a lot of teaching experience already. What was it like transitioning from college into your career? Was there really even a pause? Like,
No.
tell me a little bit about that process for you.
Honestly, I feel like I heard from a lot of people like there's a huge jump and you feel weird and like there's like, you know, there's a lot of space, and I was like, I mean, it just feels exactly the same. Like I feel like, and that I know that's super weird, but so last May, so like exactly a year ago, I graduated from fine art, which is now art practice at the time, right now. But I graduated from fine art and I walked and I actually gave the commencement speech. So that like felt like a normal graduation. But then in the fall, I was student teaching and I was finishing up my teaching degree.
Mm-hmm.
So like I was in school, but I wasn't in school because it was like technically class, but I was teaching. So it was like this weird scenario. And I did that through December. And then once December hit, I was still working for CAP, and I was still like doing some jobs at CCS, and I was working at another place kind of near my house where I was helping and assisting in an art room. And then I was like doing that, and then this pandemic happened, so I really haven't had like a whole lot of like open space. Like it has felt like a very natural flow because I had so many jobs while I was going through school,
Mm-hmm.
and I had made so many different connections. Like I don't think since I've been a sophomore, I don't think I've ever had less than 2 jobs like at a time. And that's like good because it's like I'm making connections. I've met all these people. So I don't know if I've ever had a feeling that like I didn't have somewhere to go or I didn't have a place to, you know, like have a job. But then once this pandemic happened, so then I was at home, and then I've kind of moved up in the CAP program. So it's been kind of weird. So like I feel like in the shorthand is the transition has been seamless because there's been no point of break. Like it was just constant. And if I could recommend that to any student, just like if there's like even a part-time job that you have during school, if there's a way to continue that right after school, like that will help your transition go seamlessly because it's something that normalizes from one space to another, so it doesn't feel like time just stopped and you have no idea what's happening now. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that helped me a lot.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I'm just like, when did she, like, oh yeah, she graduated, but she's been teaching and she's still teaching.
Right.
Yeah, so
like
that's awesome.
I've been teaching for CCS for like 3 years now, but I've only graduated a year ago. I know, like the timeline, everything overlaps.
So tell me a bit, and for folks who are tuning in, tell me a bit how the art education, like the role of the art education program in those opportunities, because I know unlike some schools, you're doing at CCS, you're taking art education simultaneously with your major, right? So at what point did you start doing student teaching, and tell me a little bit more of how the program worked for you?
Yeah, so I was actually kind of lucky because fine art and art education worked pretty well, like hand in hand with each other in terms of like classes and scheduling and things overlapping. It actually was a lot easier than I like remember some of my friends saying that they were like struggling, and I was like, oh, this is piece of cake. But the first year that you're there, you're just in your, and again, this is my experience. I don't know if they've changed it. I know CCS is going through all sorts of changes.
Yeah, I know.
Right. So
second semester, first year, now they're going to start having art education classes. But when you were studying that first year, you didn't do any art ed, right?
Right. And then the second year, so then after that you have one class. And then in that one class you go over, the classes are like supposed to be like you would take like a drawing class or an illustration class. These classes are based on like specific things that you have to learn. So like the first one is like history of education and things like that. Then it goes into more like learning, development, psychology, into like your next class. And every class that you take, you have a certain amount of hours that you have to do observation and assisting in a classroom. So they help you match up with a teacher for that area, and then you have to have a certain amount of hours. It's like 15 to 20 hours every class where you're assisting in a classroom. And then like every class that you take, it's like 5 more hours. It like adds on. So then by the time you get to the last 2 classes, it's like elementary, like you have to specifically, like the whole class is based around like elementary. And then the second class, and the last one that you would take before student teaching, is all based around secondary. Gotcha. And so at those times you would be spending all of your time like working in those classrooms, building lesson plans for those. And so, but I mean, and you're doing lesson plans and getting different ideas and doing different readings and projects in all of these classes. So it's kind of like a studio class and like a general ed class in one. So it is a lot of work, but it's definitely like when I graduated, I had a huge binder of stuff like lesson plans, any sort of packet I need to know, practice tests, contacts that I had. Like it was like I had it ready, and I reference that all the time. Like, so it was helpful, and so that was kind of the process, was breaking it up like that.
And so you mentioned in the last year you're doing that elementary and then secondary. And I know our certification program helps students who want to teach K through 12. What would you say is your favorite age range to work with?
Oh, this is hard. And people ask me this all the time, and I don't know if I have a good answer, but because I like different ages for different reasons. I think that it's really interesting, and I love working with like the little kids, like elementary, because the projects that you can have are so fun. And even if it's like a one-day project, a lot of it is just building motor skills and developing like simple ideas about color and things, but they take it to a whole nother level. If you're like, let's do a project, like one of the projects I taught when I was student teaching was creating like we did clay, and so we did little pinch pot monsters, and so then I had them make wanted posters for their pinch pot monsters, and they had to come up with all these characters. So then we talked about like moods and colors and feelings and how all those things connected. And like, while that's a super advanced and there's like a really advanced theory, like those kids got it like that because we could like relate it to them in a way that had to do with like Inside Out, the movie. And so then it was like, they were like, yep, got it. And so, and like, that was so fun. And I had a blast making that project.
I was gonna say, that sounds like a fun project to do.
It was a blast. And they were so funny because they would come up with the funniest things. Like their monsters had to have like some sort of like talent, or they had to be able to do something, and then they had to be scared of something, and then they had to like, there were different things that they had to come up with and write about. So it was bringing in social emotional learning. It was talking about and it also brought in writing, so it was relating to their English. They had to draw it, so it took what they built in 3D, and they had to draw it in a 2D form. So like, we covered a bunch of stuff, but they were having so much fun that it was like all those things that they were learning, they had no problem doing. And like, they could be working, and I could be like, okay, who remembers what this term means in clay? And then they just like shout it out if they were working, and it was so naturally fun. And so I like doing projects like that. I love wearable projects because, why not? Because that's also a fun aspect that I feel like should be taught in schools. But then I also really enjoy working with the older kids because you can really develop things more, and their skill sets are higher. And obviously because they're older, and so really to develop projects to a higher level and help them with like portfolios and help them really like work to complete a finished project. And they've been working so hard on it for weeks, and that's also a beautiful thing too. So that's so my long answer.
Different ages. I mean, that's a beautiful answer because it's I like teaching in general, right? It's like I like teaching different reasons, which is
Right.
beautiful. Because I know I've heard some teachers like I can't work with the kids or the teenagers. They think too, whatever, and you're just like, these are the reasons why these people are awesome. These are the reasons why these students are awesome, and
Yes.
that's because you're an amazing teacher. You can teach whoever.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right, so I have a couple more questions. I don't want to hog all the time. For those who are just now tuning in, make sure to add your questions to the question box so we can ask them to Allie here live for you. So I have maybe 4 or 5 more questions, and then we'll move on to everyone else. So I have a question because a lot of professionals and educators have seen their world like turned upside down by the pandemic, right? And I know as somebody who works in higher education, the education realm has changed a lot as a result of the pandemic. So I know you talked a little bit about doing, the CAP from home work. Do you foresee any major shifts in the future of your field or how you're doing your work, or like this coming fall, what do you see going on for you?
Yeah, I definitely feel like there's a huge shift in education, how classes are run, and how students are going to be learning. And we are in the technology age where, like, in the last 2 years, I don't know if I've had a classroom where, like, their kids didn't have cell phones. Like, and that was becoming common. Like, when I was doing a summer class for CCS, we did, like, self-portrait class, but we called it selfies because that makes more sense to them. And they all took out their phones and we took selfies every day, which also a blast, by the way. And so, but I feel like we're moving in a way where there's going to be like, there's instructional time and then there's making time. And I feel like that's also really important to how art is, because I feel like you do need some instruction. You do need, like, you still need to figure out like how to do new things. But I do think there's a aspect where we're getting more into individual progress and individual building, making, and creating, which I think kids actually don't get enough of, because even when we're in school, we only have, like, especially elementary, their classes are like 40 minutes once a week, which is like no time at all to do anything. That's why we have like 1-day projects, because by the time they come back, they're like, what did we do last week? And which I'm like, it's funny, but also true. And so I think now we're also working in like, and the one thing I've really enjoyed that the Community Arts Partnership has been really pushing is doing classes more than once a week, and really moving towards this online program, even if it's just art tutorials where people can follow along and make things from home, because that's not only where we are right now, but I feel like if we can teach that sort of thinking, we'll be better off as we go anyway. Like, even if like things start opening up and we're back at school in the fall, I mean, if we've already implemented this mindset of, oh, I can just go look and follow this tutorial, or I have like A, B, and C things at home I can make things out of. Like, if we can implement that thinking now, then that'll help us down the line to help kids be continuously creating.
That's a beautiful way of thinking about that. That's powerful. Self-motivated artists from the start. All right, so
you have to be a little bit like, even if it's just like, I feel like I get stuck sometimes, and so sometimes I'll just sit on my floor in the studio and look at stuff, and whatever is most intriguing to me, I'll like start pulling things out that way. But even just that aspect can help,
immersing yourself in art in some way, shape, or form outside of that instruction. Yeah. Awesome. All right, so we've talked a lot about you as a teacher, but I want to talk a little bit about you as a student, and not a college student, as a high school student, because I have a lot of students who watch these who are in high school, or who are maybe transferring from college, so they're at the very beginning of their path while you're in your career now. What were you like as a high school artist? Did you know you wanted to do like an art practice or art education background? I
knew ridiculously early in my lifetime, and which my family, we all joke about this now, because there were times where like me and my sister and my cousins were like, I have a really close-knit family, and we all live like within 10 minutes of each other, so there's that. But and so we saw each other a lot, and we still do, but like we can remember times where like everyone's outside and I want to draw, and they're like playing in the water in the summer, And I have like we have like in our family, we have a lot of artists and teachers and musicians. So it was like, it came very naturally to me. And so like, I remember my grandpa trying to teach me how to draw, and my mom went to school for graphic design. So, and now, when my grandpa passed away, my family let me have all of his art books and all of like his drawing tables and things. And so like, I've always had a supportive family and the tools to do it, even though some of the stuff is very old. But he actually went to CCS before it was called CCS, when it was called the School of Art and
He went to the
Crafts, I
Society of
think.
Arts and Crafts?
Mm-hmm.
Whoa, that's throwback.
So yeah, so he was he would be 100 this year, I think. So, and then he also went to Cranbrook. So then after that, so it's kind of funny. Like, I feel as though I'm like kind of following his footsteps, but um and so I've always like, again, had the supportive family. So I knew pretty early on that I like, and I always was like staying after school and helping people like tutoring, and like, and I was always involved in tutoring programs, and like was always the kid in class who like sat in front and like wanted to hear everything and would end up helping other people. And then like, and so in high school, I actually was stuck between going into music and art, because I really loved being in band. I was in jazz band and marching band and normal band and, you know, all that stuff. Most of my school schedule was music and art and like one math class. And I know there's a teacher out there who's just like rolling their eyes like, oh, that girl. Like, but so by the time I was a junior, I think I kind of veered a little bit towards more art, but and I think it mainly had to do with what I might practice outside of school. Like when I got home from school, was I more likely to pick up my instrument, or was I more likely to start on a drawing? And that kind of moved me towards there. So then when I started looking at schools, CCS was one of the schools that it was so funny. CCS had come up in my, when I was in high school, every summer there was like a different scenario where I was like talking with someone from CCS, or like and it was so funny. It just like kept popping up, and my art teachers recommended there. And then when I took a summer art camp at Cranbrook, some admissions people from CCS came and looked at my work, and it was actually Sue Enright was one of the people that I had talked to over the summer, which didn't click till I was working in admissions. I was like, hey, I know you.
Like, I remember you from somewhere.
I know. I was like, which is the best thing ever, because then I got to work with her. But then it was, I actually, when I started looking at schools, I had looked at a couple of schools in Michigan and like, in different places, and CCS what stood out every single time. And it was, and I'm not saying this because I went there or worked in admissions. I'm saying this as my general experience. And I said this 4 or 5 years ago, and I will continue saying this. But when I was there giving a tour, it was like the nicest people giving tours. And I remember going to like a college fair and talking to the people that were there versus like other schools. I was like, they're kind of mean. And it was just like a whole attitude thing. And I'm like, even just like, if you've ever met me or like watched me work, it's very impulsive. Everything is very based on feeling. And that's how I make a lot of work. And that's how I make a lot of decisions. And so it was like every single time I had met someone from CCS, they were super positive and high energy and just like really nice and welcoming. And then when I had actually toured this place, I loved the studio space, and I loved how like small the classrooms were and how like close I could actually be working with my professor. So at that point it was kind of like, okay. So I think in my senior year I was kind of like, yeah, I think this is where I'm going. This is what I'm doing. So
that's awesome. And it's beautiful because not only did you experience those things, but I'm sure you've delivered that experience for all the students that you've worked with as a student ambassador and as a person working in continuing education. Like, you're continuing that legacy for CCS because you have like just one of the best personalities. Oh my God. Really, every time I come to the offices and see you, like, hey, Allie, you're just awesome. So, so it's a reflection, you know, we reflect the environments that that we're attracted to because that's a part of who we are, you know? Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm glad that you chose CCS. So I have two more questions and then we'll open it to the audience. What's one thing that you learned or gained from CCS that you would say changed your life or changed your perspective?
One thing that I could not stress enough was that when I was at CCS, the amount of connections and people that I made through the fine art department and like the education department is unbelievable. Like I would not have the jobs that I've had or had the opportunities or been in the shows that I've been in thus far if it was not for the people that I had met, whether if it was a professor or someone who came in to visit or give a lecture, or it was like someone working in the department, or even like people I worked with like in the admissions department. And those connections, like I can't even imagine like what I would be doing right now if I hadn't met half the people that I had met when I was at CCS.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's one thing that people sometimes take for granted is those kind of like connections that you like don't think are that important, especially while you're at school because you're just trying to finish all your projects and ignore the fact that you haven't slept for 24 hours. But I think that's like my one thing that I think really shaped like every year was meeting new people and being involved in a lot of things. And I was crazy involved with things, whether like working or in clubs or both degrees. But I mean, really it paid off. Like I've never at one point thought that I wasn't going to have a job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, education is definitely a facet of school, but there's so many other returns on an investment in your education. Yeah.
yeah.
All right. Last question. If you could give advice to, since you're a teacher, it can be any high schooler, but I typically ask your high school self, knowing what you know now, what is one piece of advice you would give yourself or someone in high school who's interested in pursuing their creative path?
I would say someone who was sort of in my place who like kind of knew already that they wanted to go into art was just keep making art like constantly, even if you're like going through like feel like a dry spell almost, or you're just like you're not as creative, like go outside, even if it's just doodling or tracing the shades outside like that make like the shadows, like anything like that can help. And I feel like when I was in high school I would get hung up on everything having to be like this grand project.
Mm-hmm.
And like experimentation and just having fun and just doing is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And you definitely like when you're younger, like everything has to be perfect. And I was very like that. And now I'm like, hot glue, things break, whatever. And like that's important because you need experimentation, you need to do, you need to make.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would tell myself, just to sort of chill.
They have fun with it. I'm going to take that advice as an adult because that's advice that I need.
I know, I'm saying that. I'm like, I feel like I still need to remind myself that, like, all the time.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. All right. So I'm going to check and see if we have any questions from our audience. If anyone has dropped any questions in our Q&A box. I know sometimes folks are shy to ask questions live. But don't be. They're anonymous. Or I can make them anonymous.
No bad questions. I know that's like the teachery thing to say, but there is not a bad question.
It's so true. All right. So I don't see that anyone has asked any other questions, but is there a place that people can follow you if they want to ask questions after the live or check out more of your work?
Yeah, definitely. Anyone can follow my Instagram, Allie Runyan 23. And feel free to ask questions, send me messages. Any of my, like, also I have a website that anyone is, feel free to check out. It's just AllisonRunyan.com.
Awesome. And I see someone did drop a question in. The question is, what are the most important practices that a student artist should take part in while working towards a degree?
Meaning practices like on campus, like working towards a degree, or before even getting your degree, like before choosing a college? What would you say?
Clarification. I don't know if the person who put that question can clarify which they're asking about. It says while working towards a degree, so maybe when they're in school.
Yeah, I'll answer it that way. So being in school, I think an important practice, which actually has nothing to do with art making, is taking care of yourself. And there was a lot of things that I saw when I was at CCS where like people weren't sleeping for days, and people were like weren't eating right and whatever. And that's kind of part of college. It's like you get on weird sleep schedules and everything's funky. But I really think like, and I know this about myself, like I need a certain amount of sleep and I need to eat a certain amount of protein and drink water so I don't get migraines. And then then I can actually keep working. And if you obviously will make better work and if you feel better, like if you're sick constantly, then you're probably not going to be making work unless you are somehow in this like bizarro land and every time you're sick you make like masterpieces. But I really highly doubt that.
Not the case. I hope that's so what's reality.
I don't want to single anyone out. But that's what I would say. I think it's important to actually like take care of yourself and take time for yourself. Like when you're in school, like classwork is obviously very important, like getting homework and going to class, like that's important, but also taking time for yourself, like going to see your family or going out one night with your friends, like that's an important part of college and needs to be sort of recognized. And like if you are interested in joining a club, like go to a club meeting, like just go, like don't hesitate, just check it out, like anything like that. I feel like the more things that you go to or involved in, like you might feel overwhelmed, but those more things like can lead to other things and will make new friends and you meet more people. It's just opportunities just happen. So that's what I would kind of practice more, like your outside social skills and taking care of yourself, like mental, physical health. Think about that stuff while you're at school.
That's the best advice I've heard. No shade to any other alumni lives, but that's really good. That's everybody should write that one down. Keep that in their back pocket.
I've watched it for a while.
Me too. I mean, I know. Like, yes, it's true. You know, this whole college path is about pursuing you know, a career, but it's a part of your life, and you want your life to be something that is enjoyable and not draining you, and not you can start to question if you're doing the right thing if you're always exhausted or sick or tired. And so taking care of yourself is just as crucial as getting the work done. Yeah,
I know. My mom would always say like she'd make me come home like every other week just to like have a family dinner, you know, and just like something like that just kind of like takes you away and it makes you step back. And I don't know if anyone else is like this, but I find that like when I've been working on projects for so long, you kind of get brain dead. Like you sometimes can't come up with new ideas. So taking breaks, stepping away, coming back, and then you're like, oh my God, I never saw it. Like I didn't see it like this before. And that's incredibly important. Like even now as an artist, like, or like as a teacher, like even if I've been working on lesson plans or working on I've been working on this giant collage shadow, a drawing thing, and I've had to like I have it on my floor and then I had to work on it and then walk away and then come back, and like that's something that carries with you. So that would be my advice.
Beautiful advice, and thanks for asking that awesome question.
Yes.
Allie, you're a dream. You're wonderful to talk with. This has been so inspiring, and I know that not only will the students in your classroom benefit from your wisdom, but anybody who watches the recording of this or whoever meets you will learn a lot from you because you just have amazing insights. So I just want to thank you so much for your time and sharing your journey with us today. I want to thank everybody who tuned in live, or if you're watching the recording, thanks for watching the recording. And I just want to encourage everybody to continue tuning in for these alumni lives. You may get a jewel of wisdom that you didn't even anticipate gaining. So thank you so much, Allie. I appreciate you. All right,
thank you for having me on. I appreciate it, and I'm always happy to give advice and talk to anyone who wants to talk about art or teaching, anything like that. Always good time.
Well, you guys make sure to follow Allie at Allie Runyan 23. Right number, I think. And make sure you continue to get some of her amazing wisdom. And I will see you all at the next Alumni Live. Bye, everyone. Bye, Allie.
Thank you. Bye, guys.